All right, folks, our guest now is Lincoln Mitchell, who is a noted political consultant. Good morning, Mr. Mitchell.
Morning.
Thanks for joining us. A lot of interesting politics in the Bronx, to say the least. Let's start with a general point. How much of a risk did Roberto Ramirez take in endorsing Larry Seabrook over Elliot Engel, thereby bypassing an incumbent?
I think it was a serious risk.
You do?
I think it's a very tough race for Seabrook, and I think that, you know, with an eye towards the 2001 mayoral election, I'm not so clear what it gets for Ferrer. I think, you know, the obvious notion is that this is a way to build a Latino African American coalition. I think that's going to be tough. I think Ferrer, if he wins on message and wins on reaching out to a much broader segment of the electorate. There's going to be a couple other candidates that have real records in the black community too competing for that vote. And I think ultimately Engel wins, and you can potentially create problems with an important part of your Bronx constituency.
So does your analysis here point and kind of point to and underscore Assemblyman Ramirez's contention that this had nothing to do with Fernando Ferrer's future aspirations?
I think everything that happens in New York, everything that has happened in New York politics since about January '98 has to do with the 2001 campaigns on one level or another. Yeah, I think virtually every primary there's a subtext. So I'm not sure I believe that.
You don't believe that? You thought that he was thinking the same thing?
Yeah, I think it's hard to imagine why else a county leader would go against a sitting Democratic incumbent who's thought of as a pretty good congressman.
Assemblyman Ramirez says, well, it's been performance. We haven't had the performance we need. You say that was just a way of conjuring up an explanation.
I mean, when you think of the members of Congress who are taking up space from the New York delegation or nationally, Elliot Engel doesn't come to mind particularly. I think he's a pretty good congressman. Certainly votes the right way on the issues that are important to New York and the Bronx, and has got to be seen as the real front runner in this race, and largely because of that, which also makes it difficult.
Will voters be interested and concerned about ethnic considerations, Engel being Jewish and Senator Seabrook being African American?
I think some voters will. I think when you run against an incumbent, particularly in a primary, you have to make the case the incumbent has done a bad job. I think that when you look at the congressional primaries throughout the city in 2000, some of them, that case is easier made than others. It's easier to make the case that Ed Townsend's been a bad congressman than that Elliot Engel has been a bad congressman. Yes, race and ethnicity makes a difference. In a low turnout primary, Elliot's base is going to be an important part of the vote. He's been in Congress and he's built relationships with the African American part of his district and the Latino part of his district, and he's gotten their support before. He'll undoubtedly do better among Jewish voters than voters of color, but he'll be more than competitive among those voters as well.
In terms of political strategy, Senator Seabrook came out with this button that said elect the first black congressman. Of course, he says it wasn't my button. Now, is that wrong? Is that unfair? Is that calling in the race card right at the outset? Or, as Assemblyman Klein once pointed out to me and others, it's just simply being proud of who you are?
I don't think it's wrong or unfair. It may not be a meaningful campaign slogan. I mean, I don't think it's going to really bring voters to the polls, particularly when there's a large Latino chunk of the electorate that may not respond to that at all. So I don't think it's wrong or unfair. I probably wouldn't have done it or advised him to do that had I been involved in that campaign. I don't think it's wrong.
So, and you don't see it necessarily as the focal issue. Do you think that ultimately voters and the tone of the campaign will wipe away this ethnic thing and be able to focus really on ideas for education, crime, and healthcare?
Well, I think that if the argument would be made that Elliot Engel is somehow really bad for African American voters, really bad for Latinos in the Bronx, that'd be a different story. I don't think anyone is really making that argument. This isn't a case of someone who's been in there too long and the district has changed dramatically and his views are out of sync.
Well, some people say that that's the case.
I think what some people say is that he's white, which is,
undeniable.
Which is true. But, certainly, for example, on issues that have been important, supporting Clinton on important issues, supporting the president when impeachment was an issue, which was a major issue among African-American voters nationwide. They were his biggest backers. Elliot was really outspoken in support of him. So I'm not sure that you can make the argument that this guy's some kind of a racist. And I think that's the second half of the race piece for it to begin to make sense.
How pivotal an election in Bronx politics is this primary? the Seabrook-Engel one?
I think it's a very exciting primary. I think it may be less pivotal than people think.
Uh-huh.
Whoever wins this race, Roberto's still going to be the county chair. Ferrer's still going to be running for mayor, most likely.
For a while, anyway.
For a while, anyway. I mean, until he says otherwise, but he's still a legitimate candidate
Sure.
until then.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that Engel goes and then tries to knock off Ramirez as county chair. I don't think it would be successful if he did. So I don't think it's that pivotal. However, having said that, if Seabrook wins, then it's a very pivotal race. Then this is the first time in a real long time that a county leader has really been able to do something of substance other than taking out an incumbent congressman.
Another thing that this has done, and you'll see how we're shifting now toward a different race, but the Ben Franklin Club in the Bronx obviously has supported Elliot Engel, who's been a member of that club, and there really is a visible split now between the Riverdale politicians and the county leadership. How significant is that split? How long-lasting will it be? And will there be repercussions for people like Senator Eric Schneiderman and Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz?
I think it may be significant, but not for Eric Schneiderman and Jeffrey Dinowitz. I don't think that Eric Schneiderman has anything to worry about in terms of actually losing his seat. I think Roberto could get someone in that race that could make Eric's life a little unpleasant for a while, but the district is largely Manhattan. He's reasonably well liked there. He's strong there. The only way to beat Eric would be to find somebody from Manhattan who would put $500,000 of their own dollars into the race. That's unlikely to happen. Dinowitz, similarly, he's been an assemblyman. These are his folks. Where it's potentially
so that even if they were to put up an opponent of some sort, you think he'd be strong enough to?
Yeah, I think both will be strong enough. Where it's potentially significant, and this goes back to the earlier race, is that if the tension gets worse, this is an opening for another mayoral candidate to do quite well in the Bronx. If a Mark Green or a Hevesy or a Peter Vallone could pick up that support, and I'm not sure that's likely to happen, but if it gets to that point, then suddenly a candidate like, just say Mark Green, to pick one of them, who previously was not going to do that well in the Bronx, can now come in a strong second in the Bronx.
Why would that be? What am I missing here?
The voters up there would move away from Hevesy, from Freddie.
From Ferrer.
Right.
Because they get annoyed at this county leadership
making war
block.
on the Riverdale politicians. And if you get those politicians moving in a block to another mayoral candidate, that's going to be where the damage is, rather than trying to take out an Eric Schneiderman.
Had Lorraine Coyle-Capel gone through different channels and maybe requested support before she made announcements, or made her intentions known to the county leader before she, just said simply, "I'm going to run in this race," would she have been able to be endorsed by Roberto Ramirez, or was he really not going to support any strong opponent to Senator Villela?
I think, regardless of the answer of that question, she should have done it. In politics, even if you know somebody's not going to support you or not support you as enthusiastically as you might like, and I'm not saying that was definitely the case, but it's likely the case, you go and you talk to that person. That way the person can't tell other people in politics, well, she never came and talked to me. That's the mantra of politics in New York City. She never asked me. She never came and talked to me. So she left that open, and she shouldn't have.
You think she got bad advice? It came out of Senator Schneiderman's office, we think.
I think she was probably excited about the race. If you're looking at a state senate, if you're looking seriously at running for the state senate, particularly against a guy like Villela, who is generally thought of in broader Democratic circles as vulnerable, you go to the Senate campaign committee first, and that would be Eric Schneiderman and Marty Connors. So, at some point she probably went public where she should have first gone to the county leadership, which is what you would do in any county.
Mike Benedetto, was he put up simply to make her life miserable?
I'm not sure. I think that, ironically, he might be a stronger candidate in a general election. The way that you're going to beat Guy Villela is with a strong Italian-American candidate. The swing voters in that district, your Democratic base is people of color and Jews, but your swing voters, and there's a lot of them, are Italian-American Democrats. So maybe they're putting him up just to make trouble for Capel, but in reality, he might be a strong candidate. Just on that.
I saw the numbers this morning in the Riverdale Press of monies raised. Mike Benedetto falling way behind certainly either Senator Villela or Lorraine Coyle-Capel. How important in this race is money? I mean, it's not quite the same as a presidential race, and it's not quite the same as a mayoral race. How important is the dollars?
I would say it's more important than a presidential race.
Really?
And the reason is you're running for president, you get your name in the newspapers anyway, right? Al Gore could be outspent $1.50 to $1 by George Bush. He's still going to get on the newspapers every day. It's the down ballot races where the only way you get voters' attention is by paying for it. That's something that I think is not always understood in politics. You're running for city council anywhere or state senate anywhere, the papers really aren't going to cover it. The Daily News is not giving this race much attention. So the only way you get to people is through the mail if you're running in this kind of a race, and through paid phones and by paying people to go out there and work.
So you think he could? I mean, off the top of my head, I think the numbers were something like 100,000 to 15,000. That's a significant.
It's a pretty insurmountable.
Yeah. You want to say who you think? Seabrook, Engel, you and
I think Engel gets reelected.
And Coyle, Capel, and Benedetto.
I think she wins the primary, and I think that, barring anything unusual happening with Villela, he gets reelected.
Does the party support her if she wins the primary?
The party in the Bronx?
Yeah, the Democratic.
They certainly should and probably would do so formally. Yeah, whether to the extent to which they work for her is a different story. And certainly the party in the Bronx's major priority for 2000 is delivering a huge majority for Al Gore.
And Hillary Clinton.
And helping Hillary get elected, which is actually a competitive race.
I didn't ask you this beforehand, so I don't know if you're aware of it. We had a phone caller who asked this question, and I don't know the answer to it. I thought I had read about it somewhere. Assemblyman Ramirez says that he's not going to run again. Do we know who's in line to run for that seat?
For his seat?
Yeah.
I've heard different names, and I'm not sure which one.
No, so we don't know yet.
No.
Okay, we'll have to find that out. Now, another race that Assemblyman Klein and I were discussing was the Carl Heastie-Joey Jackson race in the Northeast Bronx. Mr. Heastie has the backing of the party, but then there was that very disturbing story in the paper today. Do you think Joey Jackson's going to drop out ultimately? There's been some talk he has a residency problem or some other.
And now he wants to be restated on the ballot, because I think if he gets restated, he stays in.
He stays in, and can he win over the party support?
Depends. It's going to be. My bet is
another
no, he doesn't,
good race.
But it'll be a good race. I think that, an assembly race, particularly, remember, this is a very, very low turnout year, even in the Bronx, and even with the angle.
Why would that be?
Well, there's nothing really driving the top of the ticket. The way
in the primary.
Yeah, the way Hillary may have a primary, we're learning, but it's not going to be a serious one.
Yeah, he was here, the doctor, way back, and I was scratching my head after he left. Frankly, I didn't know what the story was there.
It's very hard to figure out people's motivations sometimes, but they're not going to be. This is not a highly competitive primary. This is not something like the major recent one was the David Dinkins Ed Koch race, where you had 1 million people sitting wide going to the polls. You'll have less than 400,000 people going to the polls citywide, maybe a little more, which means that the people who do vote are people who actually pay attention a little bit to this stuff, and political clubs and political organizations are more important because they know who those folks are.
I think that in the Bronx, because there's a lot going on out there, there'll be a lot. Assemblyman B, I mean, this is something that I'm looking forward to pursuing as this election season goes on. He is now the party's choice for state senate. Shocking to me. I mean, has he earned his way to that point? I don't even know how to phrase the question.
Well, I would agree with that. I'd also phrase it differently. Why would anybody want to do that? Why would you go from being in the assembly, where you're going to be in the majority and have seniority, to the Senate, where you may be in the majority someday, but it's not going to be easy?
Maybe that's a clue as to what he's about and what his work has been about.
And this is I think this is a tougher race for him than it is for Carl Heastie.
To defeat Ruth Thompson.
Yeah, I'm hearing that she's.
I had heard about some sort of deal that with the Westchester. This is really kind of chatter that I heard just talking with somebody who was pretty well involved in Bronx politics. That if in fact Westchester pulls out pulls out Ruth Thompson, then the party will pull out Mike Benedetto, the Bronx Democratic Party.
I don't know.
No, you haven't heard that.
I mean, I haven't heard that. I'm not sure that I would do that if I were Westchester. Really.
Because they stand to get.
They could win.
that particular race. Let's talk a little bit about the Jewish vote and Hillary Clinton, which is obviously in the news. And I'm not going to go into this whole did she say it or didn't she say it. To me, it's like I don't think people care. So I don't want to get into that. But why hasn't she gotten the Jewish vote? And can she still get it? Assemblyman Klein suggested that it was there for the taking. If she wanted it, just make a couple of moves, make a couple of right statements, and she'll get it. Or is the resentment of her more ingrained than that?
I think, just to be fair about it, what we're talking about here is will she get more than 60% of the Jewish vote? She'll get 55 to 60 at this point if the election were held tomorrow, which means she's going to win the Jewish vote. Will she get in the kind of margin she needs? Is
80%,
like 70%,
yeah.
Really. I think she can. I think it's going to be tough. I think that there is those swing voters. There's some residual doubt about Hillary among that segment of the Jewish electorate that's not entirely about Jewish issues. So you're not necessarily going to get that vote by really proving that you're okay on Israel.
So it's not a matter of Jewish issues. It comes back to that very strong block of anti-Hillary voters who don't like her anyway, and doesn't matter what ethnicity they are, they just don't like her and they're not going to vote for her.
It's some of it is that. A lot of it is the people who just aren't quite comfortable with her yet.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people who you meet every day, you say, I'm a Democrat and I've always voted Democrat, but there's something about her. Sometimes it's the carpetbag issue. Sometimes it's I'm not really sure what she's going to do for us issue. Sometimes it's just a personal. She has, and over the last 8 years, we've seen a lot of Hillary Clinton. Some people like her and some people don't. And I think that this is a segment of the Jewish electorate that's probably more suburban. It's probably more middle of the road. She may have to go after those voters by talking about abortion rights, by talking about education, by talking about Bill Clinton's record on the economy. These are people who would vote for her husband in a minute. My advice to Hillary would be run so close to Bill Clinton, people think he's your wife. You're his wife.
Yeah, which is something she can actually prove.
Yes.
The difference between them now, according to the polls, is essentially zero.
Yeah.
What is going to be the difference in this race as far as getting those swing voters to go one way or the other?
I think one of the differences, which we've already seen since Rudy got out of the race, is Hillary shoring up her base in the city. Not the base Democratic vote, but the broader Democratic vote. With Rudy in the race, the challenge for Rudy was get 40% in the city and you win this thing. With him out of the race, the challenge for Hillary is hold Lazio at under 30. If you can do that, then you leave the city without having to win upstate, without having to win in the suburbs, but to be competitive. So that's one piece. The second piece is to continue to hold the ground that you gained upstate if you're Hillary, when you were running against Giuliani, who basically refused to go upstate. And where the race up there was this interesting thing of, Midwestern Protestant blonde woman against loud ethnic guy from the city, which is a very unusual dynamic for Hillary and Rudy, but that was kind of real up there.
Yeah.
And she'd made some ground. She got to hold that ground. And in the suburbs, which is where the real key swing vote is, she's got to find the right issues that click with those voters. And I'm not sure she's there yet on those issues.
The race is close. Do enough people know even really who Rick Lazio is? Has he had enough time? Will he have enough time to establish his presence strong enough to get those same swing voters?
He may not need to do that. He may need to just hold them, keep them away from Hillary Clinton.
Interesting.
And it may be that when Hillary attacks him on TV, which she probably will at some point, if he's not well known, she'll define him that way. But on the other hand, you got to consider the source sometimes. And what the Republican Party has been very good at doing, and I think not entirely accurately, is portraying the Clinton-Gore administration as these nasty, nasty people who are always on the attack. So that one of the ways they're trying to immunize Lazio from this attack is just by saying how nasty Hillary Clinton is, rather than defending his record.
Interesting. Very interesting point. Again, from the voters' point of view, one of the things which I'm always aware of when we get into these political discussions and discuss them like they're a football game is we forget that we're still dealing with people's lives, with health care and all these other things. And I'm sorry, folks, we're not talking about that now. Now we're playing football. Let's talk a little bit about the future mayor race and Freddie Ferrer's stance in it. The numbers came out recently. Hevesi had raised the most money. Mark Green a little further back, and Freddie Ferrer right up there. I was surprised because the earlier numbers said he wasn't. And then Peter Vallone in fourth place, simply in terms of dollars. That was surprising to me as well. How do you read what's to come, and what does Freddie Ferrer need to do to establish himself citywide?
I think Freddie Ferrer has a real shot at this thing if he does the following. And here's what I would tell Freddie Ferrer. Freddie, I think there's two candidates in this race that can really tell a story about what they've done as in government, which is what people in 2001 are going to want to hear. Giuliani has won the war over how New York City is going to be governed. No one is saying, maybe we shouldn't arrest low-level drug dealers anymore. That's part of no one's campaign platform.
And well, they may be saying it, but you're right, it's not part of a campaign platform.
So the question is, how do you make yourself close enough to that record of Giuliani's without associating yourself with the pretty heavy negatives among Democratic primary voters? The police excesses, Giuliani's, shall we say, tenuous relationship with the First Amendment and broader issues of democracy, things that a lot of primary voters don't like. My feeling on Ferrer is you have two heavily overlapping bases. You have the Bronx and you have Latino voters, and of course those groups overlap. And you need to expand beyond that rather substantially. That only gets you 16, 17%. In a four-way race, four and a half maybe with Albanese, you're going to need 30 to get in the runoff. And what I think, where he gets there is not on picking off different demographic groups, but on being competitive everywhere on message. And his message is, I've been borough president of the Bronx for 12 years, and look what I've done. I've been part of what's made New York City great again, rather than I'm attacking Rudy. And at the same time, because he's from the Bronx, because he's a Latino, people are going to understand him that he's not Rudy Giuliani.
How, my sense is the answer to this question is not very, but how nasty will this campaign get between Hevesy, Ferrer, Vallone, and Green?
There's always, and we certainly know it in New York very clearly from the 1992 Senate primary, there's always a hesitancy to go nasty in a four-candidate race because you don't know where your voters are going to go, particularly with some of the real similarities between Hevesy and Vallone coming from the same borough and the same viewed similarly politically, with Green and Hevesy both being Jewish men of roughly the same age. So I don't think you win this by being nasty. The only way you'll see people be nasty is if somebody begins to pull away by early summer of next year. If Mark's at 55% at that point, which is unlikely, or Hevesy is, they're going to have to be beaten up. The other place you'll see nastiness is with not attacking people in the New York Times, but attacking people in local media and in ethnic media. So you make the case against Alan Hevesy in the Amsterdam News, for example, and you attack him on his African-American record there rather than more broadly on general.
It should be interesting. Certainly, Bronxites are interested in seeing how well Fernando Ferrer would do and could do. I guess he would become the first Bronxite elected mayor. Is that true?
Not sure.
We'll have to think about that.
Not sure.
Certainly, the first Latino.
Absolutely, and the first Bronx in a while.
Yeah. All right, we could talk forever. There's a lot going on, but Lincoln Mitchell, we thank you for your time because certainly you helped clarify a lot of things for us and help the enjoyment of the football game go on.
That's right.
Whether we've solved the problems of crime and healthcare and everything else, I don't know. But we appreciate your input into the program today.
Well, thank you. It was a delight.
Great. Folks, what we're going to do, we're taking a short break and more Bronx Talk. Don't go away.